Welcome to the battlefield of brains, where strategy meets chaos and every move burns with intensity. Watch grandmasters clash, pieces fall, and legends rise. Nicholas Pert pushes d4 boldly, staking his claim in the center and announcing an aggressive opening intention right from the first moment. Wesley So replies nf6 calmly, testing Pert's central ambition while preparing flexible counters from every direction like a coiled serpent. Pert develops nf3 smoothly, reinforcing the heart of his formation and keeping options wide open for an evolving strategic battle. Wesley launches g6 confidently, signaling kingside fianchetto plans and sharpening the board's tension with quiet but deadly intent. Pert advances c4 forcefully, expanding central control and hinting at future queenside pressure, ready to explode at any moment. Wesley activates bg7 sharply, placing the bishop on its long diagonal, like a laser aimed straight at Pert's central structure. Pert pushes g3 steadily, fortifying the long diagonal, and preparing to unleash a harmonious fianchetto setup in the coming fight. Wesley counters, with c5 explosively, challenging the center directly and provoking structural tension that threatens to erupt instantly. Pert develops bg2 gracefully, setting his bishop to watch the long diagonal and preparing coordinated central influence with quiet menace. Wesley surprises with Quafive, a sudden checking thrust that probes weaknesses and forces Pert into defensive calculation early. Pert blocks with nc3 firmly, interposing the knight and maintaining composure, while keeping his central structure intact under pressure. Wesley jumps na4 aggressively, invading Pert's territory and challenging him to resolve the growing central conflict without hesitation. Pert responds qd3 cautiously, shielding key squares while keeping the queen active and preparing hidden tactical resources. Wesley strikes with cxd4, tearing open the center and testing Pert's coordination as the battlefield becomes razor sharp. Pert answers next4 decisively, recapturing in the center and planting a knight deep where tactics can ignite on any move. Wesley retreats nc5, repositioning with precision as he eyes Pert's queen and central squares with renewed pressure. Pert pulls qd1 back calmly, avoiding tricks while regrouping for a more stable formation as the tension continues rising. Wesley brings n6 into play smoothly, reinforcing pressure on d4 and preparing flexible central and queenside operations. Pert advances e3 quietly, strengthening the center and opening lines for future development toward a more harmonious structure. Wesley jumps na6 menacingly, eyeing powerful central squares as he tightens the noose around Pert's position. Pert castles o0 confidently, tucking his king away as the battle's intensity begins shifting toward open and tactical play. Wesley captures nce4, sacrificing structural harmony for immediate activity and forcing Pert to make a critical decision. Pert replies x4 boldly, accepting central tension and opening lines that may either empower or expose his defensive resources. Wesley unleashes bxd4, activating his bishop with fierce energy and striking directly at Pert's central vulnerability. Pert jumps nd5 forward, challenging the bishop and igniting complications as both players maneuver for tactical domination. Wesley retreats bg7 calmly, keeping long-range pressure alive as he maintains dangerous latent threats across the entire board. Pert develops b3 naturally, eyeing the queen side while reinforcing central squares and preparing coordinated operations. Wesley plays q8 steadily, regrouping his queen for future assaults while maintaining potential pressure through multiple avenues. Pert fires k4 aggressively, targeting weaknesses on the queen side and provoking Wesley to respond with utmost precision. Wesley counters nc7, shifting his knight into a defensive stance while preparing tactical resources tied to his queen's movements. Pert lands bb6 sharply, creating direct threats on the queen side and forcing Wesley to confront difficult structural choices. Wesley captures xb, breaking the queen side open and inviting a chaotic struggle as the position begins to explode. Pert strikes eng7, sacrificing material for initiative and injecting a wave of tactical heat right into Wesley's camp. Wesley calmly recaptures qxi7, neutralizing the check while keeping material superiority and retaining central dominance. Pert grabs qxi8, snatching the rook with fearless ambition and turning the game into a wild tactical showdown. Wesley replies bxb2, counterattacking mercilessly and dragging the fight into deep complications where every move counts. Pert pushes c5 fiercely, opening new lines and seeking to undermine Wesley's structure with a sudden wave of pressure. Wesley captures bxa1, taking another rook and increasing material advantage as the board burns with tactical fireworks. Pert advances cxb6, using his passed pawn like a battering ram to fracture Wesley's defensive setup. Wesley places qs5 confidently, centralizing his queen while eyeing targets across both wings in a dominating stance. Pert plays rx8, finally regaining the lost piece and stabilizing material count while keeping dangerous threats alive. Wesley castles oo smoothly, securing his king and transitioning the game toward a fierce middle game with active forces everywhere. Pert pushes a4 ambitiously, grabbing space on the queen side and preparing to pressure Wesley's pawns with continuous aggression. Wesley captures qxb6, eliminating Pert's advanced pawn and restoring balance on the queen side with precise timing. Pert plays raccoon, centralizing the rook and intensifying pressure as he eyes Wesley's queen for tactical opportunities. Wesley answers k6 calmly, withdrawing to a safer post while maintaining influence over both central and queen side lines. Pert drops q8, invading boldly on the back rank and threatening multiple points that force Wesley to remain alert. Wesley pushes b6 patiently, stabilizing his structure and preventing Pert's queen from causing deeper penetration. Pert advances h4 energetically, launching kingside operations and signaling his intent to stir complications regardless of material deficit. Wesley responds c6 firmly, reinforcing the center and preparing to mobilize his remaining pieces for a decisive coordinated attack. White retreats b5, repositioning defensively, while keeping options open to coordinate with rooks and defend weak, dark squares. Black plays r6, doubling down on central control and preparing to invade White's second rank while pressuring pawns. White pushes a4, expanding on the queen side and aiming to create a passed pawn or open lines for rooks and bishop. Black captures qxb6, removing the advanced pawn and keeping material balance while maintaining control of key central squares. White responds rook, centralizing the rook to support the c-file and prepare future tactical operations against Black's king. Black plays k6, repositioning the queen safely while keeping pressure along the a-file and maintaining tactical flexibility. White moves quite bait, boldly placing the queen deep in enemy territory and threatening infiltration on the back rank. Black pushes b6, solidifying queenside structure and preventing White's queen from creating immediate tactical threats. White plays h4, starting kingside operations and threatening pawn advances to destabilize Black's structure slowly. Black responds d5, striking the center aggressively and opening lines to increase the scope of bishops and rooks. White retreats bf1, keeping the bishop safe while preparing to reinforce central squares and slow Black's advancing pawns. Black plays qb7, targeting weak squares and coordinating the queen with rooks and bishop for maximum control of open files. White captures qxb7, exchanging queens to reduce immediate tactical pressure while hoping to survive the middle game. Black recaptures bxb7, centralizing the bishop and maintaining domination over long diagonals while keeping pawns flexible. White plays rc7, activating the rook aggressively along the 7th rank and threatening material gains or tactical skirmishes. Black responds bd5, moving the bishop to an active central post to block threats and control key squares. White plays rxc7, capturing material and attempting to stir complications while putting pressure on Black's coordination. Black moves r8, reinforcing the file and preparing to contain White's rook while threatening counterplay on the 7th rank. White plays bg2, bringing the bishop back to coordinate with rook and pawns, keeping tactical possibilities alive. Black repositions bb3, targeting weak pawns and threatening infiltration while tightening control over White's queenside territory. White plays rb7, advancing the rook aggressively on the kingside while preparing to invade Black's weakened positions. Black captures bc4, reclaiming material and activating the bishop along long diagonals to exert maximum pressure on White's camp. White responds rxb6, grabbing a pawn and trying to stir complications, keeping hope alive amidst the growing Black dominance. Black pushes raconeo, checking the king and forcing White to respond while maintaining relentless control over the open files. White moves k2u, escaping the check and coordinating with the rook and bishop, hoping to survive Black's mounting threats. Black plays r-don, placing the rook on the dangerous file, intensifying pressure and limiting White's defensive options drastically. White advances a5, opening the kingside for potential counterplay and attempting to disrupt Black's tightly coordinated pieces. Black captures gxf5, simplifying the position while strengthening control over key squares and keeping tactical threats alive. White moves bf3, repositioning defensively to cover critical diagonals and support remaining pawns against Black's advancing forces. Black plays RD2, dominating the second rank, threatening key pawns, and preventing white from generating meaningful counterplay. White marches KJTTO, bringing the king closer to support defensive operations while trying to maintain some resistance on the king side. Black pushes H4, advancing the pawn to restrict white's king and prepare further infiltration with rook and bishop coordination. White plays KG3, stepping the king forward to contest key squares and assist defensive pieces against the black assault. Black moves BD7, centralizing the bishop to control long diagonals and limit white's defensive maneuvering effectively. White plays R-bone, contesting the b-file and trying to maintain counterplay while under intense pressure from black's coordinated pieces. Black repositions b4, activating the bishop aggressively to dominate the queen side and support the advancing c-pawn. White pushes Rione, aiming to contest the e-file and create threats, though the initiative is firmly in black's hands. Black plays BC2, controlling long diagonals, preparing to escort the passed pawn, and restricting white's king and bishop movements. White moves Re2, doubling rooks to defend against black's advancing pawns, and attempts to slow the inevitable promotion It. Black plays Bf5, solidifying control, cutting off escape squares, and coordinating with pawns and rook to seal white's fate. White plays Bc4, attempting to blockade the passed pawn and maintain diagonal influence, but black's dominance is overwhelming. Black pushes Sk3, advancing the passed pawn relentlessly, forcing white's pieces into passive defensive positions. White moves K3, bringing the king closer to the action to try to stop the passed pawn and support remaining defensive resources. Black responds Bf5, coordinating the bishop with the passed pawn and king to dominate critical squares and crush resistance. White plays Bb3, offering a blockade for the c-pawn while desperately trying to prolong survival in a collapsing position. Black advances K7, centralizing the king to support pawns and dominate key squares, steadily tightening control. White moves Ket2, shuffling defensively to try to halt black's coordinated assault and protect remaining pawns. Black pushes F6, securing king's safety and preparing pawn advances to further restrict white's options. White plays Bc4, attempting to control the c-pawn and prevent its promotion while keeping diagonal threats alive. Black moves Kd6, centralizing the king, coordinating with pawns and bishop, and steadily pushing white into a passive stance. White plays Rd4, trying to contest the c-file and maintain control over central squares, though black's dominance remains overwhelming. Black moves Wart6, activating the rook to target weak pawns and prepare the advance of the passed c-pawn relentlessly. White pushes Fowler, attempting to create space and disrupt black's coordination while clinging to the last defensive resources. Black responds Rc2, controlling the second rank and coordinating with the bishop to restrict white's rook and king movements. White moves Bf1, repositioning the bishop to cover critical squares and prepare to slow black's advancing c-pawn. Black pushes Kd6, centralizing the king further to dominate key squares and support the coordinated attack on white's remaining pawns. White plays k3, bringing the king forward to block the c-pawn and assist in defensive maneuvers. Black responds rc3, checking the king and forcing white into passive positions while tightening control over the board. White moves rd3, interposing the rook to block check and maintain minimal defensive cohesion amid black's pressure. Black plays rc4, swinging the rook to dominate the c-file and prepare to escort the passed pawn toward promotion. White plays rd4, shuffling defensively to contest the file and hold critical squares, struggling against black's coordinated forces. Black invades rc2, threatening pawns and cutting off white's coordination, steadily forcing white into passive defense. White moves rd3, repeating the defensive maneuver to hold the c-file and buy a few more seconds of resistance. Black advances rc3, pressuring pawns and maintaining an unbreakable blockade while preparing for decisive pawn promotion. White plays fowler, trying to create a counter-threat and slow the advancing c-pawn, though options are minimal. Black moves kf5, bringing the king closer to support pawns and control critical squares, while restricting white's king movements. White plays bf1, keeping the bishop active to block the c-pawn and protect key squares, desperately prolonging the fight. Black plays rc2, occupying the second rank and threatening white's remaining pawns while preparing unstoppable promotion. White moves k3, trying to intercept the passed pawn and coordinate with the bishop for the last defensive efforts. Black plays rc3, checking the king again and tightening control over the central and queenside squares simultaneously. White moves rd3, interposing once more to block check, while keeping the king slightly safer from immediate threats. Black plays rc2, swinging the rook to cut off escape routes and support the advancing c-pawn for promotion. White plays bb3, placing the bishop in a last-ditch blockade for the passed pawn and attempting to create tactical resistance. Black pushes key3, advancing the passed pawn inexorably, forcing white's pieces into passive defensive positions. White moves k3, bringing the king closer to contest critical squares and support any remaining defensive resources. Black moves bf5, coordinating bishop and pawn, dominating diagonals and central squares, leaving white almost completely paralyzed. White pushes fowler, trying to create space and delay the inevitable promotion while keeping minimal counterplay alive. Black moves kd6, centralizing the king and preparing to escort the c-pawn decisively toward promotion. White moves bc2, attempting to block the c-pawn and hold diagonal influence while survival options dwindle rapidly. Black plays bb3, placing the bishop on a strong diagonal, supporting pawn promotion and controlling escape routes. White plays k2, moving the king defensively to block the pawn and maintain coordination with remaining pieces. Black advances kc5, activating the king to support the c-pawn and restrict white's movements completely. White moves k-fowler, stepping forward to assist defense, though black's coordination makes resistance almost impossible. Black repositions rb6, dominating the b-file and preparing to clear paths for pawn promotion while constricting white's pieces. White pushes a5, trying to create counterplay on the king's side, a desperate attempt to complicate black's plans. Black captures gxh5, simplifying the position and maintaining control, keeping white's king boxed in. White moves bf3, attempting to maintain bishop activity and control key squares, though defensive options are limited. Black plays rd4, activating the rook to dominate the board and support the c-pawn's unstoppable march. White plays kgto, repositioning the king defensively while attempting to delay black's inevitable pawn promotion. Black pushes kd4, coordinating king, bishop, and pawns perfectly, sealing victory and leaving white with no counterplay. I'll end the video here. Please give me a like and subscribe to my channel. In non-charity, cats and pat. I'll keep finding the best and newest videos to share with you. Thank you so much, and I wish you all happiness and good health.